Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. Spring is in the air and it feels like the season is finally starting to click into gear, and for many salmon anglers I'm sure you'll be thinking of trips to book and plans to make. But one of the big issues affecting wild salmon and sea trout numbers is the presence of salmon farms in some of the most pristine locations around our Atlantic coast. The issue of salmon farming is something we continually cover on this podcast, and for this week's episode we catch up with John Murphy from Salmon Watch Ireland to find out about updated legislation that means salmon farms are having to renew their licences. This also means it's time for action and opposition to these renewal applications, and John Murphy tells us what can be done to counter the increasing threat of salmon farms to the environment and our wild fish. But first, Tom, any reports for us?
No, God, it's flat. And that's the best way of putting it. It's very flat.
What about all the hope last week, Tom? It was all the sun's out and, you know.
I tell you what now, that hope, I'm just pushing it back a bit and it's going on to next week now. It's going on to next week. Well, hopefully now, because I'll be flat out now next week getting out. So hopefully, well, look, it has warmed up a bit. It needed it. Now, classic case, I had to put a paint on one of the fiberglass boats, all right? And I know it's always a good acid test, or a good litmus test, I should say. When you paint, if it's over 10 degrees, it'll dry. If it's not over 10 degrees, it won't dry, and clients will be wondering what the sticky substance is 2 weeks later, right? So painted about there earlier on in the week, dry the following day, bone dry. So that's coming up, and I wouldn't have been able to do that the week beforehand. So look, hopeful again. Didn't get out this week. We'll be getting out this weekend now, finally. And as I said, I'm out next week. So we'll be hopeful. The only caveat is wind is forecast to switch northeasterly next week and temperatures to drop a bit. But I will be hopeful that the water temperature has gone up a bit with this 10, 11, 12 degrees. So look, as you say, always hopeful. Always
early
hopeful.
Days, early days.
Yeah, so that's it. So no, so that's it. We look forward to that. But just back to this week's program. I thought it was very interesting there, to hear the updates on what's happening here. It's I mean, we've been dealing with this issue quite a bit now, and it's amazing I wasn't fully aware that all the farms are going to have to reapply. That's
renewal of the license.
Yeah,
it's really interesting, and it's well worth. I'll put the links into Salmon Watch Ireland for people because now's the time. There's an 8-week window of public consultation that people can voice their opposition or objections or raise issues about any of these applications that are going through. And look, if you're in an area, if you're a concerned salmon angler, there's no harm writing a letter, sending an email. The more people that do it, the better.
Yeah. I think that's very much anybody. I mean, like, we harp on about it here, but we need to keep vigilant about this and keep on top of it. But I'm just going to say something, and we talk about it in the show. When you have a look at the applications, set aside more than 2 minutes. I mean, I think I counted one of the applications had 27 PDF files, right? So if you don't download them, just press view. If you start downloading them, you're just gonna, all the memory in your phone is gone. And another one had 33 PDF files. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there, and you can lose yourself.
There's about 800 to 1,000 pages in the reports, like all told. So, good luck with that one. And John goes into explaining kind of, I suppose, why this is, and there's a certain sense of kind of drowning in information, and then,
isn't there?
Going up against, multi-billion euro conglomerates. So it's certainly an uphill battle. But they won the case in Bantry Bay, so that shows that there is potential for change. All we can do is just keep hammering home the message and keep people aware of the damage that salmon farming does do to the environment, the wild fish, and also as a product itself.
Yeah, no, we've got it. Listen, while we're on the subject of salmon, I believe you've a new project coming up, another podcast.
Yeah, and in fairness, actually, while we're talking about it, Plug is season 2 of The Last Salmon is going to be starting in a few weeks, the end of March. So myself and Jim Murray, it was very well received last year. So we're going to do another 12 episodes. Again, kind of looking at the plight of wild salmon, finding out what can be done to save it, what is going on, the situation, coming up with solutions, and really, really interesting people we got to spoke to. And it's like any of these things, yourself, Tom, you start kind of digging into an idea, you think, oh, was there 12 ideas there? Now suddenly, you've got about 30 or 40.
Yeah, and then you have to whittle them away.
Exactly. So there's one really interesting one, and quickly, I'll just tell you this quickly. He'll be coming up in one of the first few episodes. Was his name is Frederick Mawinkle. Now listen to this, Mawinkle.
Right, yeah.
And if you take off the inkle part of his surname,
yeah,
what does it spell? Maui.
Maui. Right.
Really interesting. So what happened was his family were one of the first salmon farmers in Norway, and now they're big business, family. And they, in the 1980s, they sold out. They sold it on to whatever company that was getting bigger. Though that company subsequently sold. It subsequently became Marine Harvest. 2018, Marine Harvest wanted to change the name to Maui to reflect the original legacy of where it came from, right? And the Mawinkle family were up in arms about this. Hugely up in arms about this. And Frederick, he has one share in the company still to this day because it means he can attend the AGM.
Right.
As a shareholder. And very publicly in 28 was voiced the family's opposition that they did not want their name associated with this. Now, unfortunately, it failed, and the company is known as it's actually Movie is how you actually pronounce it, but we all
is it
Movie is how it's supposed to be pronounced, but we all call it Maui. But so it's really interesting into with Frederick about his family, the background, and then kind of how they saw what was this. They said in the 1980s they saw what was being done, and they were against it. And he says it's the unsustainability.
Did they withdraw entirely then from salmon farming?
Well, they sold out in the 1980s, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he calls himself, he's a really interesting guy, he calls himself an eco-industrialist.
Right.
Basically, he says, listen to the episode, Andrew, it's a good plug for it, but he said, literally, I think it was in the early 2000s, he's a businessman, and he's sitting on a plane with somebody and who was a very pro-environment, but was a businessman. And basically, he said it was like a light bulb moment. He said he realized, I can help save the planet, but I can also make millions doing it as well. So it was win-win for him.
Yeah.
So that's why he's an eco-industrialist. And that's part of his mission is he wants to just, get the message out there, tell as many people as possible about what's happening. So yeah, that's one of the interviews anyway. So there's 11 more.
Excellent.
You'll have to stay tuned. What we'll do is, I'll probably do is what we did last time is I'll put new episodes into the Ireland on the Fly feed as well.
Yeah, that's it. We'll put it up on the Instagram and the Facebook pages as well.
Yeah, so that'd be great. So look, salmon farming is a big part of it, and also it's something that we do in Ireland on the Fly. It's just to keep people informed, and I think it's really important to keep in touch with John Murphy from Salmon Watch Ireland as well, just to find out about all these issues. So look, let's hear from John Murphy now, and he gives us the background to this latest development around the salmon farm licenses.
Well, back in COVID days in 2020, obviously, a lot of people had nothing to do, so we decided we'd launch a complaint to the European Union regarding Section 19A4 in relation to the licensing of salmon farms in Ireland. Now, this particular piece of legislation came into force in late 2006, and it came into force due to there was a court decision in the European courts that basically said the way Ireland was licensing its aquaculture sites was not didn't consider everything in the Habitats Directive, and it wasn't compliant with the Habitats Directive and the Birds Directive more especially. So the EU and Ireland came to an agreement that once a salmon farm had put in a renewal application, that they could continue to operate while the Irish state got their various conservation objectives in place and in relation to the Birds Directive and Habitats Directive. So that was brought in as a temporary measure. It was supposed to last a number of years, a small number of years, but 18 years later, it appears now finally that the complaint has been listened to by the EU and obviously by the Irish state. And effectively now that part of the Fisheries Act is going to be repealed, and that particular section is going to be deleted. Now, in practical terms, what that means, all the licenses now, this is why we're having an avalanche of license applications now. The fish farmers were told quite recently, or maybe in the last year or two, that this Section 19 would be going, and because of issues from the EU and obviously on foot of our complaint. So effectively now, all the salmon farms which were not licensed, they were on a kind of a permit system underpinned by the legislation that was brought in 2006 so that they could operate ad infinitum. So now they have to go into a process of application now, which would have a fairly thorough examination of all the environmental aspects of salmon farming in bays. That would include like the effect that they're going to have on wild salmonids and on the near coastal ecosystem. So that's why you have so many applications in now, and they're fairly lengthy applications. We had 5 in the last number of weeks, and each of them runs about 1,000 pages of documentation. So that's going through the process now, and we're writing a submission on each of them. And what we're going to do as well is give a small template maybe that could point people in the right direction, that how they could make a submission on these or an objection or whatever you want to call it. So that's where we stand.
So many points there to raise. Like, one is why the 18-year delay?
Well, you see, the Irish state and the NPWS had to put conservation objectives in place. They had to do various studies on these bays and in adjacent SACs, put in conservation objectives, look at them legally and whatever, that they were in compliance with the Habitats and Birds Directive. And, they shouldn't have been licensing farms or trying to license farms without having this work done. So they didn't have this work done, but they appear to have completed it now. The completion of it, there may be some issues involved in that they may not be strong enough, and we would suggest that they aren't strong enough. So that's, we'd be basing our submission in regard to probably mostly in regard to wild salmonids and freshwater permulsins, and indeed coastal pollution as well.
So my understanding of this, John, correct me if I'm wrong, is that now because they have to come in for renewal of their license based on the repeal of this, the Act, has forced now any company applying for an aquaculture license that they have in their application, they have to be much more cognizant and aware and have a lot more detail and information about the environment and the habitat and birds. So essentially they've kind of forced them to a higher standard.
Oh, absolutely, a way higher standard.
So therefore, based on that higher standard, does it mean it's harder? Will it be harder for them to get the license?
Well, in practical terms, it should be. But most of these are renewals.
Yes.
Of existing licenses.
Can I ask you about that, John? Most of these are renewals. What was the criteria that some of the salmon farms had to apply for renewal, and what were there? Obviously, there were other farms that don't have to apply for this. Was it a timescale of when they were set up?
No, all farms have to apply for renewal.
So all farms?
Absolutely. Every single one of them.
Every single one of them.
No, unless there is one. I think there might be one that got some sort of a license that was going to last 30 or 40 or 50 years or something. But that probably will be open to challenge. But they've all been informed that this section is being taken out of Irish legislation, and they will have to comply with the application process now in regard to the Habitats Directive and Birds Directive. So they all have to apply. Now, we've only got 5 and 3 is 8 out for public consultation.
Right.
There may be more that have gone to statutory consultation, which we don't get. That would be Inland Fisheries Ireland might have them, Antashka may have them.
Why is that actually? Why is it
Yeah,
that some are
actually.
statutory and some are?
That's just no, they're all public. They all have to be public, but it's a kind of a time frame thing. They first go to statutory consultees, and there's a number of them. I don't have them here offhand. Most of them are kind of government bodies: NPWS, IFI, Antashka. There might be one or two others, but they all have to go to public consultation eventually, and you get 8 weeks to make a submission.
Can I ask you, with my cynical hat on, how much difference does it make in the sense of a lot of the times, especially if it's a renewal, you kind of get the feeling of, sure, it's just they're just crossing the T's, dotting the I's here, and it's nearly a tick the box.
Not so much. It could, in practical terms, it could really turn out like that. But we'd be hoping we'd be able to make a difference, and that Inland Fisheries Ireland may be able to make a difference now. Heretofore, the science regarding sea lice, has been always quite good. But it's gone to a new level now. And I think, the majority of scientists now do understand that there is a significant impact on wild salmon and indeed on sea trout. And that's one other issue that's going to come into it now, even though it's not don't think it hasn't been probably brought into law here, but the nature restoration law that was recently passed by the EU includes sea trout for the first time. And obviously includes salmon as well, but it's the first time the sea trout have been included in this.
Explain the nature restoration law. What is it, and has it been enacted?
Well, it has been passed by the EU, right, and Ireland voted for it, even though there was a lot of misgiving about. I think you'll hear a lot about it, about rewetting of bogs and various things like that. But there were a couple of annex species put into it, including sea trout and including Atlantic salmon. So what bearing that has on legal processes yet is, we need to sort of have a look at that and understand that. And whether the courts would take cognizance of it, I'm not too sure. But it is a helping hand. It is a helping hand indeed.
It struck me, John, and myself and Tom kind of just glanced through the 1,000-page reports.
Yeah,
and I'm presuming they're top heavy for a reason, to hopefully drown people in wealth of information.
Well, yeah, they are, and you can see from the Bantry Bay case, the judge gave a 300 or a 540-page judgment in that matter, and I mean, the complexities of that High Court case were enormous. I think the judge was even taken aback by the amount of literature that was produced for those cases. So it is a very, very problematic thing. But it all comes down, like what we say about all these things is, our specific interest is in salmon and sea trout. Effectively, the way we make our submissions, it is basically on the impact that they make on those two species. And we'll continue to do that. Now, other people may have other reasons for making submissions or objections to salmon farms. We can't be everything. We just like to sort of a situation where we're going to effectively try and do something for salmon and sea trout conservation in regard to salmon farms. There's lots and lots of aspects in the Habitats and Birds Directive which have to be examined, and that probably takes up a huge amount of space on those applications. So you're quite welcome to read any of them. I have 5 of them here in front of me, so thousands and thousands and thousands of pages about various bird species and whatever, which we don't, we can't effectively read that. We're really focused in on salmon and sea trout and probably near coast pollution as well.
Just my cursory read of it is, it's almost as if there's very little focus given to sea lice damage and damage to wild salmon based on these reports that I'm reading.
Yeah, well, you can say that because, a lot of the counter stuff comes from the Marine Institute, which basically, is relying on those famous studies that were carried out in the early 2000s and whatever. And they would still hold on to the belief that the impact is negligible. So we have other other ideas in regard to that, and thankfully, Inland Fisheries Ireland have a broadly similar view to ourselves.
Because I read these documents going, but like, this isn't real, or, this is not what we know in terms of the wider science.
Yeah. When you see the studies, I suppose the studies are very focused, and they do show an impact, obviously. But there is an impact on the ground that everybody can see, obviously, with your sea trout populations in the west of Ireland and beside me here in Waterville. We can see the damage, and we associate it or correlate it with the presence of a salmon farm. It's difficult to prove, but I think we're getting to a situation now where some of these licenses may in fact be rejected, and we would hope that they would, but that's not. But most of them, I can tell you this straight up, most of them will probably end up in court cases, and that's a massive issue, because to litigate anything in Ireland is vastly expensive.
And have you got resources for that, John?
Some. Not much. It is very difficult. I mean, if you had to go in, in relation to all these, I think there may be in and around 35 to 38 license applications for renewals. If you had to go in for each of those, I don't think you could take a broad case, including all the farms. I think it would have to be on each ministerial decision. So you'd be going back to the well every time to take the case, unless you had a case that sort of the judge came down and said, look, there is scientific doubt here about the impact of sea lice, therefore the license should not have been given. And that's one of the issues that we really want to bring to the fore. If you can get one of those across the line, you can probably land them in on every other license.
Those surveys that you're going back to 2000s, for anybody who's just never heard us talking about it before, you might just quickly go over them so people know.
Well, a lot of them are from I suppose they're called the Jackson papers. They would relate an impact. They do relate an impact. They don't. No, but they look at it from the point of view of the overall survival of the Atlantic salmon at sea, which we all know has many factors influencing it. And they basically say this is an insignificant amount of damage that's been done when you consider that 95% of the fish are dying in the sea anyway. So that's basically what that says. Now, that's, I won't say it's true or anything like that, but it's the effect on the adult return rate is the issue. I think he kind of looked at it and said, look, 5% of fish come back in bays where aquaculture is not present. 4% come back in, therefore it's a loss of 1%. And we'd look at that as a 20% reduction of adult spawners, which
once again, it's playing with figures.
Absolutely, but this is the important. The important thing is to have the adults coming back, obviously, for reproduction or whatever. But that's just that's it in really kind of simple terms. We take a different issue, and. Majority.
And account to that, then that has been taken as the mantra. Then,
well, it appears to have. Yes. Yeah. But hopefully now we'll be able to put a few holes in that. Even in the Bantry Bay case, it didn't really come up. It'll only ever come up really where you have salmon rivers that where you have fish farms that are near special areas of conservation which have salmon as a qualifying interest. There's lots of them around the west of Ireland. There's lots of them down here in the southwest where salmon farms are located right beside them. Another issue is obviously the freshwater pearl mussel, which, are becoming extinct. We would like to suggest that the loss of host fish species are part of the problem there. And that's another bit of our armory that we can use. But it's very, very difficult to litigate in relation to salmon if there isn't a salmon SAC in proximity to it. Now, what do I mean by proximity? Probably within 30 kilometers is probably the kind of, well, I won't say it's the cutoff point, because a lot of fish, you get this nonsensical thing in some of these documents that, the fish don't migrate past the salmon farm. They use the north side of that bay, and they don't offer any evidence to say they do or not. It's just a kind of a throwaway statement. They don't ever go near that farm. They're 10 miles away and they don't ever go near us. So we probably know a little bit different. But another one of the big issues there with the farms as well is coming into more to the fore now is with climate and warming waters. You see kind of novel diseases like amoebic gill disease, which has been here since about 2008, 2009. And that can spread to wild salmonids. And the Marine Institute actually have gone as far as to say, that salmon smolts can be affected by this if on their outward migration there are outbreaks of this on salmon farms, which is another little bit of a situation where we can sort of try and suggest that. But there has been no real research on wild fish. No one has been going out catching wild smolts on their migration past salmon farms where AGD is present and seeing if they have AGD. Nobody has done this. No, it would be a difficult job to do, but there can't be throwaway statements in these documents to say, the salmon smolts are taking a different route or not really affected by this, and we're going to treat them with fresh water in the cages and whatever.
Speaking of throwaway statements and stuff, I was just looking at one of the applications here just while you were chatting there, John, and is again, it's just the language used because it was to do with escapees, and then they said the likelihood of an escape event occurring is unlikely. I just think of Killary Harbour.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and other cases, and we've made the point without evidence, obviously, but we've made the point that escape happened in August, when there are plenty of people out in the sea and when there are anglers on the river. Now, the time for escapes is probably in the middle of winter, because you have extreme winds and storms and whatever. There is nobody on the sea to look at that. All these things are self-reported.
Yeah.
And, I think there's an issue there as well. But we can't prove that unless we saw the fish somewhere. But regularly here in Kenmare Bay now, we do see farm salmon jump around the place.
Yeah.
It's been a few years since I've seen them now, but you would see them. But, and no escapes reported. But you see, with the treatment in well boats and whatever, they're transferring fish at sea over to well boats and back again for treatments and whatever. You're surely going to have some escapes.
But also as well, John, it's like if you're dealing with 800,000 page reports of information, are you having to counter that with your own couple of hundred pages of alternative science, basically?
No, we're trying to, as I said, we're trying to simplify the matter for us because we couldn't, I mean, actually, the judge in our case said, a group like Salmon Watch Ireland shouldn't be expected to have to go out and employ dozens of consultants to actually rebut some of the things here, and he's right. I mean, we couldn't afford to be paying some scientists to look at this document, the birds in it or whatever, and examining all those. It cost us a fortune. And, we mightn't come up with the right answer either. But, it's kind of a situation where they will bombard you with all this documentation, but they require all that documentation anyway, because the whole thing has got so strict now. But it's the interpretation of that documentation by the Marine Institute, by the way, who are supposedly the competent authority in relation to salmon farm licensing in the country. Now, if they're biased in some manner or means, I'm talking about the organization, not the individuals. If they're biased towards aquaculture, I think, a lot of those licenses could be sent for renewal.
So that was going to be my next question. So those applications go in and the public consultation timeframe, and then that closes. And who ultimately decides? So you've got all the documents on one side.
The Minister for Agriculture decides. Who
makes a recommendation to the Minister?
I would assume the Marine Institute would make certain recommendations. It's all taken on the basis of that, and then they look at the public submissions and whatever. But you see, what happens then is that we have an out. We can go to the Aquaculture License Appeal Board. And that has seemed to be an absolute failure because they don't seem to be able to make up their mind at all. I think with the court case about Bantry, the judge commenting that it really shouldn't take them 68 months or something to make a decision. But there are, like our own farm here beside Waterville, Danish, was ordered to close in 2019 by ministerial order. That's still with the Aquaculture Appeals Board. And
I was actually going to ask you, is there any update? There's nothing. That's still...
No, you get a letter every couple of months to say we're unable to determine this application. So we're taking another few months to do it.
And can you even put in FOI requests to that appeals board to see what's going on?
They won't actually tell you anything about an active appeal. We've looked for the minutes of meetings regarding certain things, but they won't do anything. They won't give you anything until they've made their decision. But no, they'll give you everything after that.
Which is kind of strange. Well, not I think strange.
Well, it is,
softer word, but that's because the problem hasn't been solved. They're still operating, and you can't delve any further into the matter.
Yeah, but they're only operating still because they're covered by the Section 19,
Section
84. 19. So that'll be gone.
Yeah. No. Can you take a case against them? Therefore, unless they go, they have to apply for a renewal of. They can't. Sure, they can't apply because the license is gone.
They have applied for renewal.
They have applied for renewal.
Danish and Inishvanarja, we've made two rather lengthy submissions in those. They have applied to renew their licenses, but it's called a renew and review. Some of them, don't like the terms of their original license. They don't actually abide by some of the terms. And one of our issues always has been with the legislation that was there was that they were supposed to continue to operate on the terms and conditions of their original license. But some of these licenses have been amended, have been allowed to increase production. So that shouldn't have been allowed because there was no license there. It is a mess.
It's a bit of a Wild West, isn't it?
It is. You have on the one hand the fish farmers and ourselves, and you have the department. And the fish farmers don't like the department. We don't like the department, and we don't like each other. Now, in fairness to the department, they haven't always made decisions that favoured aquaculture anyway. And they've been in a situation now, and it was really in relation to those complaints that we made to the EU that, they were in a state of state. They just couldn't either go forward or go back. But I think now you would see a big effort to renew those licenses. And it'll take an awful lot to actually stop them. And once they get them, you really, really can't do anything unless you go into the High Court and win the case, obviously.
And you have to prove that they've broken the terms of the
Well,
license or something?
well, it's not so much that. The High Court is a peculiar place. It doesn't really want to listen to science or anything like that. It does want to look at the process that's been followed and whether the process was adequate. If the process wasn't adequate, the license won't be quashed. But it's the adequacy, proving that the adequacy is somehow not good enough.
So hence the
is the issue.
1,000-page.
Yeah,
1,000 pages
absolutely. And, it is, if they have all the boxes ticked, it's increasingly hard. Like in the Bantry Bay case, there were a number of issues. There was an issue there about the Water Framework Directive, and they had certain modelling data that wasn't really explained, and that basically the judge said, "Look, you didn't give the correct reasons for this," and nobody can really understand what you read. And trouble with modelling is that we wouldn't be privy to what goes into the model.
Yes,
in other words, what data is put in, because you're going to get the result out no matter what. You'll put in certain data and you'll get a certain result out the other side. So we don't know what data went into it. So we really can't examine it. Now, we wouldn't have the ability anyway to do that. But a lot of that, and then there was an issue about the cages and the risk of escape. And that was another issue that they had a bit of a downfall on. So all those things helped.
Just to take it back maybe a bit, John, in terms of, and another point that was raised by yourselves as well, highlighted, I should say, was how the BIM report on the aquaculture industry in Ireland, that there was a 22% reduction from the previous year. So why was that, and what are the possible consequences?
Well, 23 would have been, as if you remember, as a marine heat wave. So they would have lost an awful lot of fish. And it just basically, there was a reemergence of disease, limited smolt production. What else did they give? The bays and the water, the water temperature became extremely high in May and June and probably lasted for the rest of the summer. And that really affects their bottom line. They get a lot of mortalities. So it dropped from 12,000 tons to just over 9,000 tons, which is 22% drop. The value went from 101 million down to 94 million. Maui are losing money here anyway.
And Scotland as well, by all accounts as well, is it?
Oh yeah, but I mean, most of these things are environmentally driven. If you get marine heat waves, you're going to have a problem. And you're going to have a problem with jellyfish. You're going to have a problem with harmful algal blooms. You're going to have a problem with sea lice. You're going to have a problem with everything.
Yeah.
Less oxygen in the water, is really, really detrimental to the farm salmon.
Which all begs the point as well, John, is like why they're not being pushed into closed containment pens on land.
I suppose that's an issue with money and cost and whatever. It's much easier to do it the other way.
Yeah, well, funny, and you just said there that Maui aren't making money on their Irish operations.
No.
Wow.
Why are they here soon?
But yet they're still looking to develop more.
Well, of course they are, yeah, of course they are, because they're being squeezed a bit in Norway, and I'm sure in Scotland is kind of nearly full up. They probably look at the coast here, and politicians look at the coast here and say, we could fish 10 more salmon farms around the country, or 20 more. Like the production there at 9,000 tons was, I can't remember now, but Scotland, was it up around 2 to 250? Like it dwarfs the industry here, and certainly Norway absolutely really dwarfs the industry here. So you don't know what they're doing here now. They do use the term organic salmon and so they can get a little bit of a premium price here. But I just think their mortalities are amazing. And one of the issues there we have with the application forms that go in, they redact all the mortalities.
Wow.
And it was, yeah. Now we're going to make a bit of an issue on commercial sensitivity is what they say for that. But we had one farm in Donegal there recently. They didn't redact the application and released it to the public. And I think it was one year they had 84% mortality. So 16% of their production cycle survived. And I think another year they had 60% mortality. Now, the farms around here have anywhere between 25 to 45, 50% here. Now, these are self-reported figures, so there may be an underestimate.
And like we've always said it, John, on this podcast, is if you had a farm with cows and sheep on the field and you had a mortality.
I know, but fish do die a bit more than cows and cattle. But those figures are not great. I mean, I did mention it to, we brought a Norwegian lady here to Galway there years ago. She would be a chief researcher there for close containment or semi-close containment. So I mentioned to her the figures of mortalities on Irish farms that she nearly fell down.
So is that comparison, like in comparison to Norway or Scotland?
In comparison to Norway, well, Scotland isn't really as bad now. Are probably as bad. Norway might be colder water.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
So is it because therefore Irish and Scottish waters were more prone to disease or whatever?
Yeah.
And just tell me this, you mentioned the figure, say, of the total aquaculture value is 100 million, dropped from 100 million to, I think you said
94 million.
94 million. What percentage of that is salmon farming?
That's all salmon farming.
That's all salmon farming, 94 million. And again, I bring it back to the figures, and I think I was looking at, was it total jobs created?
Very, very small.
200.
200.
What is the total jobs there? The figures there, Tom?
226 or something. It's 220 odd, isn't it? Something like that.
Full-time 180. Part-time 56. Yeah.
So if you include part-time and full-time, 236, right?
Yeah. It's a very small employment in the country, but unfortunately, it is. I'd say the largest part of production is probably in Galway, into Mayo. There seems to be a high proportion of employment there, and certainly in Donegal. Down here, I'd say it's quite small, especially in Kerry, the Kerry part of it anyway. But
like, you look at all the amount of people who are employed in terms of, again, I'm just talking, say, the recreational side of salmon fishing, sea trout.
Yeah.
Dwarfs the 180.
Absolutely, but you have to understand that is a huge issue, but it's not the issue for them. They're licensed and they will continue to operate unless someone puts a stop to it. It doesn't always go on value, I'll put it that way. What does the government get out of Maui? Nothing. Gets some employment in communities here and around the country, but I would assume tax or corporation tax, they're losing money. They're not paying any corporation tax.
Right, yeah.
But again, it's just I fail to see the sense of it.
Well, we've always kind of suggested that this will only be one probably on a legal issue or a scientific issue. I think trying to say certain industries are worth more money than salmon farming probably wouldn't win the day legally. I put it that way.
But I think for people to understand, that if you have an industry that's employs,
when you had a sustainable industry in the west of Ireland and down here they had,
that's being killed off basically.
That's been eradicated by that and other factors, of course.
Which in the process is also polluting and damaging the environment and killing off wild salmon and sea trout stocks.
But one of the big issues is people say to me, "Oh, it's only part of the problem." Yeah, it is, but it's part of the problem that we can control.
And it's also part of the problem that's not that is not giving anything back, like you said, to the economy and also the big misnomer about the health and benefits of farm salmon. And the other thing I'm worried about as well is you look at Scotland and the labelling now. I don't know if you saw this in terms of how
Scottish salmon.
Tom, they don't have to call it farm salmon anymore now, Tom. They call it Scottish salmon.
Yeah.
Oh, you see, when did this happen?
A couple of months ago, I think it was, that was past packaging. So you can go into it now. It's the packaging now doesn't say
Scottish salmon, yeah.
Scottish salmon.
I think it says it somewhere on the back, but it's down your right.
Chinese or something.
Sorry, but where is this applicable?
That's in Scotland.
In Scotland, right? Yeah. But here we still have to have it labeled.
Yeah, under EU regulations, you have to have it.
Brexit, the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, but who knows what will happen in the future? There might be any EU.
Yeah, exactly. So, John, tell me this. I think it's been really enlightening in terms of what's been going on. So, what can people do so we've got a couple of weeks in terms of
you've got to the 15th of April.
Okay, 15th of April. And what can people do?
I suppose, look, it's a public consultation, so obviously participate in that. A couple of our supporters have written kind of small one-page letters and sent them around the place to be sent in to the public consultation, and that's fine. The more people you get, I think there was well over 100 or 150 people made submissions in relation to Danish Island and Inishtenard, which is here in Kenmare Bay again. But that's about all you can do in a public consultation, unless you want to go into the really intricacies of it. And I assume we'll try and do that. IFI certainly will do it. Ontashko will do it. You have to sort of be looking at these things and saying, who's reading these things to take any notice of them?
Yeah. Also, as well, if you do look at the applications, and I counted them, we got a couple there. We're looking at them. One of them has 27 PDF files, and another one has 33 PDF files.
God, you're really making my day now. But but the other side, the other side of this is, if they are refused, they can go to the Agriculture Licence Board, and they have every right as well legally to go to the High Court. You see, okay, they'll have the state against them, but they sort of have a situation where they're here, they don't want to go anywhere, and they want to hold on to what they have. I think, that some of these licenses may be rejected. I don't think all of them will be, but I think maybe a small number may be rejected. But
So do you think the government's going to try to play it both ways as usual, keep Maui on side and then point to, well, look, we're doing our little bit for the environment here,
Yeah, but if we get the Marine Institute to say no, we'd be doing very well.
I think what's really interesting is you look at Iceland, and I was at the Wild Salmon Connections Summit in London in January, and there was kind of a breakfast briefing meeting. The Icelandic ambassador was at it, and also the Norwegian Minister for the Environment and Climate Change. But the Icelandic ambassador used interesting language where he said, and he was very pointed about it, we now note the developments in relation to land-based closed net farms. So, they were basically flagging, look, this is what's the future and this is what's coming down the line. And, the minister in Norway kind of referenced it as well, that this is the way it's going,
But people kind of understand Iceland, and made a very good campaign, but still 40,000 tons of salmon produced in Iceland.
4 times what we produce.
Yeah, and it's in open cage farming at the moment.
I wonder, are they starting to kind of get the way
they
the wind is blowing?
They are in Norway, but it's for different reasons. They're a little bit stuck for production in Norway now because they fill their bays with salmon farms. They have to get a situation, and what they're going to do, like, people think they're going to produce all their salmon on land. They're not. What they're going to try and do is produce lots and lots and lots of fish on land, but not to market size. They're going to rear them at sea as well. So in other words, they're going to rear bigger smolts or post smolts or whatever they want to call them, and probably put them out at up to 1 kg into farms at sea. so they can roll it over like that. And that's the impression we got when that scientist came from Norway, that they were looking at ramping up production. And we know they want to ramp up production, of course they do. But they're a little bit stuck from the point of view of the environment and whatever. But if they start producing lots and lots and lots of fish on land, not up to market size, but finishing them off in the sea, they'll probably be able to do that.
Is it too early to kind of postulate what the kind of the environmental consequences of that would be then?
I'd say it'd be worse. I would think.
Would you actually, yeah?
Yeah, there is the argument here that if you reared fish to a certain size and put them in at a certain time of the year and harvested them before the next smolt run, that you probably would get away with it. You probably wouldn't have that much of an issue from the point of view of wild salmon and sea trout smolt runs, but I'm not too sure of that. And then you have the added thing that disease has become endemic on salmon farms here in Ireland, and that, of course, can be passed to wild fish. Look, there's loads of ways. Even putting them on land is going to be. Why would they do it here? That's the issue that you'd have. We want them to do it, but why would they? It's much cheaper.
It doesn't seem to be a very successful industry here at the moment as it stands, though, does it?
No, but they're still making enough money, I suppose. Now, I think Maui have lost money in the last number of years. They're probably waiting for better. I'm sure they had better environmental conditions in 2024 because we had kind of a nice enough cool summer. We didn't have blistering heat waves and whatever. Like we took some video of certain farms in June 23. Jesus, man. The fish were trying to get out of them in no uncertain terms because just the water was too hot.
Sure, that's the way it's going to be, though. It's the future.
You would expect that. Now, there's all sorts of things being proposed, like deep sea farming and dropping down the cages down to 30 meters and stuff like that. I think these are sort of, they're in the future sometime. They're not in the current. As I always say, anything to change in this country takes a decade, if not more.
Put it this way, I suppose, if change is going to come, it's not going to come from Ireland leading the way. But, you look at British Columbia, Washington State.
Yep, fantastic.
So you never
whether
know.
It lasts, I think there's another court case now.
Oh, yeah?
I think the salmon farmers are suing the government now.
It's ongoing.
Where is this?
Oh, it's somewhere in, I think in BC.
Right.
I think it's more to get money off them.
John, listen, it's been really interesting catching up just because there's obviously so much there to kind of digest and take on board. I would recommend, I think, for people to go to salmonwatchireland.ie, sign up for your newsletter because I think there's loads of great information there just for people that want to kind of keep up to date and keep themselves informed about what's going on. There's no better way. And the very fact that, you're able to keep people up to date with the Fisheries Act and what's going on with the renewals and all that kind of stuff. And if they want more information, as I said, just go to salmonwatchireland.ie. It's well worth informing yourself there. John Murphy, thanks a million for joining us.
No matter.
Our thanks to John for joining us on the show. And don't forget to rate, review and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Plus, you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram. And myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.